She was born healthy. She cried loudly, and she disappeared from the nursery a few hours later. The hospital said she had died, that it was a sudden illness, but they never let me see her body. 20 years later, when I no longer had any strength left, a young journalist knocked on my door to interview me about cases of neonatal disappearance. What she didn't know is that she herself was my daughter. This is a true story of reunion, pain, courage, and truth. A mother who never gave up. A daughter who rediscovered who she was. And a web of lies that for decades separated entire families. If you've ever lost someone, or if you believe that true love never dies, this story is for you. Watch until the end and leave a comment. What would you do if you found out something like this? Would you tell the truth, or keep quiet? The day my daughter was born, it was raining heavily in Belo Horizonte. The clouds weighed down like lead on the roof of the Hospital São Rafael, and the air carried that smell of ether mixed with anxiety. I was exhausted, in pain, but happy. She came into the world at 4:47 in the morning, by natural birth, weighing just over 3 kilos. She screamed loudly, as if she knew from the beginning that she had to fight to exist. When the nurse placed her in my arms, my fingers trembled. I was just a scared 19-year-old girl, with no father, no support, and a mother who had refused to look at me since she found out I was pregnant. But there, with that warm, fragile little being against my chest, everything made sense. She was mine, my reason, my courage. Her name was Clara. I stayed with her for less than 2 hours. Then a nurse came to get her for routine nursery procedures. My eyes were heavy, exhausted from labor, and I trusted her. "It's just a shot, Mommy," she said. She smiled. She picked up my daughter and left. I never saw Clara again. I woke up later to morning light streaming through the blinds and the room empty. No cries, no sounds from other babies. Something felt strange, as if my chest had been split open. I instinctively touched my still swollen belly and looked at the crib next to it. Empty. I pressed the call button. Nothing. I struggled to my feet and walked to the door. I called for someone. A nurse hurried past, saying the doctor would be in soon. But no one brought me news of Clara. After almost 3 hours of begging and threatening to scream, they called a meeting with the hospital director. They said there had been a complication, that my daughter had suffered a sudden illness. We tried to revive her, but she didn't make it. When I asked to see the body, they said that, to avoid trauma, the protocol was not to allow it. When I asked for the report, they showed me a printed paper with a stamp, but without my name, and without the exact date of birth. I knew right then and there. They were lying. They called me crazy. They said it was postpartum depression, that my grief had turned into denial. My mother signed my discharge without consulting me and took me home. She locked the door. She hid the newspapers. She tore up my notes. She made me take medication that made me groggy. For months. But a part of me never slept. A part of me was still there, silently repeating the sound of Clara's crying. I knew she was alive. The years passed. I left home, worked as a cleaner, as a nanny, as a supermarket cashier, and in every supermarket, in every park, in every school, I looked at the faces of the girls and thought, could that be her? I searched the hospital archives. With the help of a nurse friend, I was able to access old birth records from that night. Clara's name didn't even appear, but there was another detail. One of the employees from that night was transferred a few days later. No explanation given. I found an old photo of the staff. I enlarged it, printed it, and stuck it on the wall. The obsession grew with me. 16 years later, I got a call. It was from a reporter for a digital magazine called Lost Voices. She said she was doing a special feature on women who had experienced loss in public hospitals in the 1990s. I didn't answer those kinds of calls anymore, but something about the tone of her voice made me freeze. It was a young voice, firm, sweet, and very familiar. She said, "My name is Helena Duarte. I'm an investigative journalist. I saw your name mentioned in an old forum about hospital disappearances. Could we talk in person?" The name sounded strange to me, but when she came, When she opened the door and walked into my room, with her black notebook and a camera hanging around her neck, my world stopped. Helena had my mother's eyes, the same skin tone, the brown hair that fell to her shoulders, the same way she frowned when she was curious. I shivered. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. "Dona Carolina?" she said. I nodded, barely able to breathe. "Before we start, can I record?" And there I was, facing what seemed impossible. My daughter, the daughter who was stolen from me. 20 years later, he was interviewing me, without knowing who I was. She sat in front of me, adjusted the camera, and opened the notebook. "Do you remember exactly the night of the birth, Mrs. Carolina?" I looked at her and smiled, unable to contain my emotion. "I remember every second." She settled back in her chair, crossed her legs, and began recording with a slight nod. I could barely look at her directly. Helena seemed so comfortable, so sure of her own identity, her own story. And I was a broken woman trying to pick up the pieces of the shards for 2 decades. "You had your daughter in 2002, at Hospital San Rafael, right?" she asked, flipping through her notebook. 4:47 in the morning? I added before she finished. She nodded. "Yes, that's right. And according to the medical records, she had passed away shortly after. Do you remember when they told you about it?" My throat got stuck. The words wouldn't come. My stomach turned. I forced myself to answer, because if it wasn't me, no one else would tell the truth. "Yes, they said she had a sudden illness, but they never let me see the body, or hold her afterward, or say goodbye." She wrote everything down with surgical precision. "Did you sue the hospital?" I laughed bitterly. I was a poor girl, alone, discredited by everyone. Who would listen to a crazy woman saying that someone stole her baby? She looked at me with slightly teary eyes. "Do you think she could be alive?" My world stopped again. How could I answer this while looking into my own daughter's eyes without trembling? "I'm sure," I whispered. Helena closed the notebook slowly. We were silent for a few seconds. She looked at my modest living room, the old furniture, the peeling walls. Her eyes fixed on a black and white photo on the shelf. Me, 20 years old, holding a folded pink blanket in my lap. It was all I had left of Clara. "Can I ask you a personal question, Carolina?" she said, lowering her tone. "Of course. Have you ever dreamed about her? About your daughter?" I swallowed hard. My eyes filled with tears. I dreamed about her almost every night. But in the last few years, she started to change in her dreams. Sometimes she would interview me. Sometimes she would just look at me, sitting in a chair, as if she was waiting for me to say something. Helena looked away, restless. She picked up her cell phone and typed something quickly. "Sorry, just checking some sources," she said. But something there bothered her. I could feel it. She said goodbye politely, promising to come back the following week with more questions. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I touched my daughter in 20 years. The door closed, and my chest collapsed. I cried alone, hugging that old blanket, smelling the life that had been taken from me. The next day, I did what I had always feared doing. I looked up her full name in the online court system. Helena Duarte, born the same year. Maternity, no record. Adoption was made official in 2004. Adoptive parents' names, Mauricio Duarte and Luciana Barbosa. Upper middle-class couple, residents of the South Zone. And below, biological mother, data not available. I felt the ground disappear. I went to the house of an old friend who worked at the city's central registry office. I asked for help. She printed out an internal document from the system. On Helena's adoption form, there was an old, almost illegible note, written in blue pen. Referred via hospital agreement, San Rafael, neonatal sector B. My heart screamed. That was it. She had been taken straight from the hospital for forced adoption. They faked her death. They erased my existence. And she grew up with a different story. I went home not knowing what to do. Yell, report her, hug her on the next visit. But what if she hated me? What if she loved the family that raised her and saw me as a threat, an invader? On Sunday, she texted me, "Carolina, I wanted to ask you a favor. Can we talk outside of the interview? There's something about you that really moves me." I replied with shaking hands, "Sure, whenever you want." She suggested we have coffee in a discreet place. I accepted. We set it up for Wednesday. I spent the next few days reliving everything. Every moment in the hospital, every face, every detail, including her, now an adult. When I saw her again in that cafe, she didn't have her camera or her notepad. She was just holding a folded letter in her hand. She was shaking. Her eyes were red. "I don't know why I came here," she said, placing the letter on the table. "But yesterday, my mother told me something that changed my entire life." Time stood still. My blood ran cold. She said I was adopted, and that there was an unofficial agreement with a hospital. She said the biological mother was a very young woman, and that she couldn't take care of me, but she never knew the woman's name. I took a deep breath, feeling like the universe had brought me here for a reason. "Do you remember anything?" I asked carefully. "Ever since I met you, I've been dreaming about the same woman I saw when I was a child. A woman with sad eyes holding a pink blanket. I thought I was making it up. But now, I don't know." She opened the letter, read a handwritten passage, and looked at me. "I want to know who I really am." And that was when I felt it. The moment. The end of a 2-decade wait. But also, the beginning of the biggest dilemma of my life. I never imagined that the most anticipated reunion of my life would come, wrapped in silence and red eyes. Helena stared at me with the letter still between her fingers, as if she herself didn't believe the words she had just read. I wanted to hug her, tell her everything, tell her that she was my blood, my flesh, my soul, but I couldn't. The pain was still greater than the hope. Time doesn't heal when the truth is suffocated by lies. She asked me, her voice breaking, "Do you think I should look for this woman?" My eyes filled with tears. "If I were in your shoes, I would look for it. No one deserves to live without knowing where they came from." She bit her lower lip thoughtfully. "My father, the man who raised me, always said that some questions only bring pain. But the pain of not knowing is worse." The letter she had brought was short, a confession from the adoptive mother. It said that after 2 miscarriages, a doctor who was a friend of the family offered her an alternative path to fulfill her dream of motherhood. Helena was only 2 days old when she arrived at their home. Without documents, without an official record, just a certificate with a fake stamp. She had grown up believing that she was his biological daughter. When she turned 18, she began to notice that her documents had inconsistencies, dates crossed out, names changed. But it was only now, at the age of 20, that her sick mother decided to reveal the truth. I listened to it all with a lump in my throat. Each word she said was like a knife stabbing deeper. Part of me wanted to scream, "It's me! I'm your mother!" But the other part, the one that had been silenced for 20 years, was still petrified with fear. What if she hated me? What if she ran away? "I don't know where to begin," she said. "I don't even know what the face of the woman who gave birth to me looks like." "You know," I thought, "I've seen it, I've touched it, I've felt it, but I didn't say it." In the following days, Helena came back to my house several times. But now, as a friend, as a confidant, she brought files, old news, reports, and without knowing it, she investigated her own origins with me. She asked me for my opinion on clues. She showed me photos from the hospital archives. And one day, she showed me an image that made me shudder. The same nursing technician who took my daughter from the room. Her aged face was in a dossier that a group of activists had put together about baby kidnappings in Brazil in the 1980s and 1990s. "She is alive. She lives in Campinas today," Helena said. "She worked for years in other private maternity hospitals. Then she disappeared from the system. Do you want to go there?" I asked in a dry, almost whispering voice. "I do, and I want you to come with me." I felt my legs weaken. 3 days later, we boarded a bus heading inland. No one knew about the trip. She only told a colleague in the newsroom, in case something went wrong. We went with light backpacks and eyes full of questions. During the journey, she slept on my shoulder. And there, in that silence of the road, with the wind blowing against the windows, I was certain a mother's love does not need to be recognized to exist. It just is, like blood running, like bones growing in silence. We arrived at the address. It was a small house with high walls. We rang the doorbell. A dog barked. Footsteps approached. An elderly woman with a hard look and short hair opened the door, the security chain still attached. "Yes," he said. "My name is Helena Duarte. I'm reporting on the disappearance of newborns in public hospitals. You worked at Hospital San Rafael, right?" The woman hesitated. Her eyes stopped on me for a second, and I saw it. She recognized me. "I don't talk to reporters. Please go away. We just want to hear your version. We are seeking the truth." "My truth," Helena said firmly. The woman sighed. She closed the door. For a moment we thought she wouldn't open it again. But then the chain was released. The door swung open again. 5 minutes. We went in. The air in the house was heavy, stuffy, as if time had stopped there. "What do you want to know, exactly?" she asked, without looking directly at either of us. "In the early hours of August 4th, 2002, a baby named Clara disappeared, and you were on duty." Silence. She rested her hands on her knees. She looked like she was carrying tons. "This happened a long time ago. And it wasn't just me. It was a system. Nurses, doctors, employees. Everyone got paid to keep quiet. Babies were sent straight for illegal adoption. Rich families, couples who couldn't have children. It was easy. Just say the baby died, forge the paperwork, burn the file." Helena trembled. "Do you remember a girl? 19 years old? Single mother? Skinny brown hair, dark eyes?" She hesitated. "I remember. She cried and cried. She begged. I took her daughter. They told me to take her. After that, I never saw her again." Helena turned to me slowly. "Clara, was that mine?" The world stopped. I tried to speak, but no air came. My hands were cold. My whole body was sweating. The woman looked at us and said with heavy eyes, "She is you. You are Clara." Helena took a step back. Her eyes widened, and she stared at me as if she were in front of a mirror that suddenly showed what had always been hidden. "Carolina." I couldn't answer. I just let the tears fall. And it was at that moment that she understood everything. The room seemed to spin. The once firm floor turned to quicksand beneath our feet. The silence that followed her name, Clara, was as brutal as a scream. Helena stared at me without blinking. Her face changed with every second. Confusion, fear, denial, pain. As if everything inside her was being forcibly unearthed. "Is it true?" she whispered. "You knew. This whole time." My hands were shaking. I tried to answer, but my voice wouldn't come. I tried to stand up, say something, hug her. But she backed away. One step back. Then another. Her eyes were breaking like glass cracking from the inside. "You knew from the first interview? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing you again," I managed to say, my throat tight. She turned around, her eyes filling with tears. "You're my mother. My biological one. The woman I looked for in every photograph, in every dream. And you just stood there silently looking at me like I was just another source? You weren't just anything else, Helena. You're everything I had, even without having you." She staggered to the couch. She sat down weakly, as if her own body no longer knew how to exist. The woman who greeted us, an accomplice in that old crime, stood, leaning against the wall, as if the guilt had grown old in her. "I only did what I was told. I was nobody. We didn't choose. We just had to obey." Helena ignored her completely. She stared at me. Her hands were shaking. Her breathing was uneven. "And now?" she asked, not knowing who. I knelt in front of her. "Now, we meet again, for the first real time." She looked at me with anger, pain, tenderness, all at once, like she didn't know whether to hug me or push me away. But then something happened. Her eyes locked on mine, long, and for the first time, there was no fear there, just mirror. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a golden pendant, a small, old, scratched angel. This pendant has been with me since I was a baby. My adoptive mother said it came with the pink blanket. I didn't believe it. I thought it was a fairy tale, but I dreamed about it. Every time, every night, she held my hand. It's the same pendant you wore in the picture on the shelf, right? I nodded, crying silently. I had sewn that angel into the blanket myself, just before the birth. It was the only gift I could give. That night, we drove home in silence. On the bus, she didn't say anything, but she didn't leave either. She laid her head on the window, listening to music, and every now and then, she looked at me, as if looking for silent proof of a bond that had been torn away, but that insisted on existing. The next few days were the most difficult of my life. She disappeared for 4 days. No texts, no calls. I panicked. I thought I had lost her again, that my truth had been too much, that she preferred the comfort of a lie to the pain of everything she now knew. But then, on the morning of the 5th day, she knocked on my door. Her face was swollen from crying, and she had an expression I had never seen before, that of a lost girl trying to find her way home. "I went to see my adoptive mother," she said. I confronted her. She cried. She told me everything. She said she regretted it the day she held me. She knew the woman who gave you away had done something terrible. I hugged her, for the first time without fear, and she didn't pull away. The following week, Helena wrote a letter, but it wasn't for me. It was for the world. A full article, published on the front page of the magazine where she worked, with the title, "I was robbed during childbirth, and this is the story of my real mother." The text went viral within hours. Thousands of comments. Thousands of women sent messages saying they had experienced something similar. Others said they were still searching for their missing children. The story became headlines in newspapers, TV shows, and podcasts. And for the first time, I saw my pain turn into an echo. She took me to meet her adoptive parents a few days later. It was a tense but necessary moment. They asked me for forgiveness. I accepted, not for their sake, but for my own. I didn't want to live with hate anymore. I just wanted to live with her. Today, she calls me Carolina. She still can't say mom, naturally, and I understand. But in every gesture, every message, every hug, I know, she's back, and she's here. One random Saturday, we sat on the couch to watch a documentary. She took my hand in the darkness of the living room. She rested her head on my shoulder, and she said softly, as if speaking to her own soul, "You always knew, right?" From the first second, she smiled, and for the first time, I saw my daughter smiling, not as a journalist, not as a character, but as someone who knows, after all, where she came from. And that came back. The world reacted to the story like a bombshell. In less than 48 hours, Helena's name was on every news portal. The newsroom where she worked was flooded with emails from mothers, children, and even former hospital employees, who, for the first time, felt safe to speak out. It was as if a veil had been torn from society. The silence was broken, and no one knew where it would end. She was invited to TV shows, investigative podcasts, panel discussions. Every time she appeared, she would mention my name. My biological mother's name is Carolina, and everything I am today, I owe to her courage to never give up. That was a punch in the chest every time. A good punch, a healing punch. But with visibility came danger. One Tuesday morning, the gate to my house was ajar. An envelope with no return address had been left on the living room floor. Inside it was a photo of Helena with a red X over her face, and a note. Some truth should stay dead. I showed her the letter. She paled, but didn't back down. This just proves we're hitting where it hurts, and I'm not going to stop now. We went to the police. We filed a report. They said they would investigate, but they didn't promise protection. Without concrete evidence of a direct threat, there's no way to request an escort, they said. The old excuse of the system. It only works after someone dies. It was then that Helena decided to do something bigger. She created a website with a network of volunteer lawyers and journalists, where victims of forced adoptions could safely submit their stories. Within 2 weeks, more than 900 reports were received. Many had the same pattern: old maternity hospitals, erased records, inconsistent reports, and always the same fate: influential families. One of these cases involved a disused maternity hospital in the interior of Minas Gerais. The former director was still alive, a woman over 80 years old. Helena wanted to interview her. We went together. Hidden recorder, discreet camera. The woman seemed lucid, but she hesitated, until she said something that gave us goosebumps. The babies weren't lost, they were traded. Who did that? Asked Helena. Everyone, from doctors to judges. It was a network. It existed. It exists. And who was in charge of everything? She fell silent. A look of terror came over her face. If I say that name, I won't get out of this chair alive. We left there in shock. This was no longer just a story of reunion. It was a national scheme, deep, alive, and dangerous. That same night, someone broke into Helena's office. They broke into files. They stole computers. But they left her hidden camera intact, as a warning. The next day, she received an anonymous phone call. A man with a distorted voice telling her to stop, or she would never see her mother again. She recorded the call. She showed it to me. She looked me in the eyes. I'm not going to run away, Mom. I kept quiet for 20 years without knowing who I was. Now that I know, no one can shut me up anymore. I started calling her daughter that very day, and she said Mom to me for the first time. It was in a whisper, but it was real. We began to take precautions. We changed our routines. We installed cameras. We started hanging out with an ex-police officer who was a friend of the newsroom. But the tension grew. With each new article published, more stories came to light. And the enemy, until then invisible, began to show itself. We discovered that the name most mentioned behind the scenes of the allegations was that of a retired, respected doctor with a career built on silence. Dr. Norberto Mello, director of 3 different hospitals in the 80s and 90s, one of the main donors to political campaigns in the region. Helena was preparing a dossier on him. It had old photos, testimonies, documents. It was the biggest story of her career, and it hurt to know that it all started with her kidnapping, with my birth, with my mourning. The night before publication, we received another threat. A black car parked in front of my house. Inside, an envelope with photos of us taken at the mall 2 days earlier. The note read, "The next article will be your last." Helena hugged me. "If something happens to me, you'll stay. Promise? Nothing will happen, my love. I spent 20 years trying to find you. Now that you're back, no one will take you away from me." She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Her voice was firm. "You gave me life. Now it's my turn to honor that." The article came out on a Monday morning. The headline was in bold letters, without metaphors. Norberto Mello, the name behind the illegal adoption network that stole lives in silences for 30 years. Helena spared no expense. Photos of missing medical records, records of suspicious transfers, excerpts from interviews with former employees, and even an internal document from the São Rafael Hospital, authorizing the relocation of newborns without a death certificate. It was a punch in the face for the system, and a warning to the entire country. The truth, even if delayed, always arrives. In the first 2 hours, the article had more than 3 million views. The hashtag, Justiça pelas Claras, exploded. People from all over Brazil began reporting similar stories. Babies disappearing, deaths never confirmed, mothers who never accepted the reports. It was a silent epidemic being exposed to the light. But with the light came the shadow. That afternoon, Helena was called to testify. The state prosecutor's office opened an investigation task force. They finally offered her protection, but she refused an escort. "If they see me surrounded, they'll say I'm a politician. I'm a journalist. And the truth is shown with an open heart. The next day it happened. I was washing the dishes when I heard the crash. A dull thud, then shattered glass. I ran into the living room. The front window had a hole in it. On the floor was a brick wrapped in newspaper. Inside it was a photo of me and Helena in a cafe, with a message written in red marker. Silence, or we bury the next generation. My body froze. I called her. Nothing. I called again. Voicemail. Panic rose like poison. I tried the office number. No one answered. My heart was beating like an alarm. I grabbed my bag and ran down the street, aimlessly. I just had to find her. That's when I heard the siren. A police car speeding past. Then another. A group of onlookers gathered on the corner of the main avenue. My feet ran before me. My knees shook. My soul begged to be wrong. When I turned the corner, I saw the crowd. An overturned car. A body being carried out on a stretcher. But it wasn't her. It was the security guard who had accompanied her. Wounded, but alive. Helena was sitting on the sidewalk, with blood on the corner of her forehead and her eyes wide open. Barefoot. Dazed. I ran. I screamed. "Helena!" She looked at me and burst into tears. Someone had sabotaged the car. They cut the brakes. She only didn't die because the driver managed to crash the vehicle into a pillar before it hit a truck. At the police station, she gave a statement. That was when the pressure started. Norberto's lawyers showed up. They tried to discredit the story. They said she had manipulated evidence, that she had used information obtained illegally. But it was too late. The prosecution had already opened an investigation. The public prosecutor's office was already involved. That night, we drove home in silence. I made tea. She took a shower. She sat in the living room with a towel wrapped around her shoulders. "If I die, Mom, promise you'll finish this fight? You're not going to die. Not now. And if I have to protect you with my own life, I will." She smiled sadly. "I didn't want all this to bring us together. I wish I could have grown up with you. I wish I could have had you at school parties. I wish I could have seen you in the audience at my graduation. I was there." She looked at me. In the audience, behind the last row, disguised. I had discovered your name 2 months before, and I watched you receive that diploma. I saw you smiling, and I cried like never before, because even without me, you had won. She cried again. She hugged me and whispered, "You always knew, didn't you? Since the first scream, since the first emptiness." In the following days, the story caused an avalanche. Norberto Mello's name was included in old cases that were reopened. 3 doctors from the San Rafael hospital were arrested. One of the retired judges was indicted. Other nurses confessed to involvement. And a list of more than 300 names of kidnapped babies began to circulate. But the war was not over. One night, I got a call from a blocked number. A cold male voice. "You're next." I called Helena. I showed her the number. She squeezed my hand. "We've already been killed once, Mom, when they took us away from each other. Now, it's their turn to feel what it's like to lose control." The week after the threat, a protective order was finally authorized. An unmarked police car began patrolling the area around our house. 2 discreet and silent officers accompanied us on our trips to the police station, to interviews and to meetings with other victims. But the feeling of being watched would not leave us. Helena tried to maintain her routine, but she was different. She was more withdrawn. She slept little. She wrote compulsively, as if words were the only way to keep her fear at bay. And every time she sat down in front of the computer, I felt closer to losing her again. This time, to an abyss that she herself had dug with all too much courage. "You need to rest," I said one night. "You've done so much. It's not enough. There are still missing names. There are still missing mothers. There are still missing answers." She was obsessed, and I understood, because one day I was too. That was when she received an anonymous email. No sender, just one sentence. "Look for Helena's name in the neonatal ICU at San Rafael. You were not adopted. You were sold with a blood guarantee. The message contained an attachment, a scanned copy of an old document with a hospital stamp and a hand-filled field. Responsible for forwarding, Maria de Lourdes Ferreira. The name froze my blood. My mom, the woman who locked me in the house after I gave birth, who tore up my papers, who drugged me for weeks, telling me I needed to accept the pain, who never cried with me, who never mentioned Clara's name again. I called her. My voice was shaking. "Hi, Mom. Can we talk?" Silence. "It's about Clara. About the day of the birth." More silence. "It's important. Please." She took a deep breath, as if she felt the years of silence about to break. "Come tomorrow, at 10, but come alone." The next day I went. Helena insisted on going with me. I didn't let her. She said it was my past, that I needed to face it with my own eyes. My mother opened the door, her face aged, but with the same hard look she had 2 decades ago. She sat down in the armchair. She lit a cigarette, even though she knew I hated it. And she said, "So you figured it out. Did you sign that paper? Did you authorize Clara to be taken?" I asked bluntly. She exhaled slowly. "Yes, I signed. The world has fallen. She was your granddaughter. She was your blood. She was a mistake, just like you were. Except, unlike me, you wanted to give birth to your mistake." My throat tightened. An old hatred resurfaced with force, but along with it came a sadness so deep it hurt to breathe. "Did you sell it?" I asked, almost in a whisper. She looked at me. Her eyes were empty. "I got a proposal. A doctor I knew. He said he could guarantee she would have a good life, that she would be raised by a family that would love her. I accepted. You would never be able to take care of her. And I was tired. I stood up. I felt nauseous. Dizziness. My hands were sweating. The world was spinning. I wanted to scream, but there was no sound in the universe to express what I felt. "You are worse than all the monsters we have denounced. You took away the only pure love I have ever had." She didn't answer. I left there without looking back. I went home with my face destroyed. Helena saw me and ran. "What happened?" "It was your grandmother. It was her. She sold you." She was in shock. Words were lost. She sat on the living room floor, as if her body had collapsed. I had the right to know who I was, and she erased it all. For money. We cried together. Long, like 2 women who had been broken by the same blood, but who could now rebuild themselves in each other. That night, Helena wrote the final part of her series. The title, "The Blood That Took Me From Home." And in the text, she said, "Sometimes the worst traitors are not in the halls of power, but in the walls of one's own home." My story began with childbirth, but my life, in fact, began the day my mother had the courage to tell me the truth, and to love me even when I had already been torn from her. The article ended with a final sentence. "Silence protects monsters, but love gives back voices." The last article published by Helena made headlines across the national press. Her biological grandmother's name was splashed across news portals as yet another confirmed piece in the forced adoption scheme. But the main focus was not on the villain. It was on the symbol. Mother and daughter, separated by silence, reunited by the truth. Within days, Congress opened a parliamentary commission of inquiry. Deputies began to publicly debate old cases of neonatal disappearances, many unsolved, others archived with unknown cause. Helena's story was used as the basis for a new bill, the creation of the National Bank of Irregular Births, a cross-referencing of genetic and hospital data between mothers and children disconnected by falsifications, schemes, and illegal adoptions. More than 400 new reports have emerged in 1 week. But what touched me deeply were the messages. Women of all ages, from small towns and big cities, writing to Helena, and to me, saying, "Now I believe my son might be alive," or "You gave me back hope." In the midst of all this, Helena changed. There was always a melancholy behind her firm gaze, but there was also a new lightness, like someone who had carried the weight of a borrowed past, and now, finally, walked with her own story in her hands. We received invitations for interviews, lectures, and documentaries. An international channel bought the rights to the story. But what had the biggest impact on us was the invitation to speak at a public school in Belo Horizonte, the same one I attended when I was 18 and pregnant, hiding my belly out of shame. The same school where I was called a mistake. In that auditorium full of attentive teenagers, Helena took the microphone and said, "My name is Helena Clara Duarte, and for 20 years, I lived with a name that wasn't mine, a story that wasn't mine, and a love that was dormant somewhere in time. But today, I am whole, because I found the woman who gave me life, and who had the courage to love me even when the whole world told her to forget." The audience was crying. Teachers, students, staff, and I, sitting in the front row, felt each word as a rebirth. In the following months, justice began to be served. Norberto Mello was arrested as a precautionary measure after a new wave of evidence was collected. 2 former maternity hospital directors confessed to crimes in their plea bargains. 23 babies were officially identified as missing due to false deaths, and 5 of them had already been reunited with their mothers. Helena was nominated for Investigative Journalism Awards, and she turned down a job offer at an international channel. "There's still a lot to tell here," she said, "and there's still a lot I want to experience with you, Mom." We moved in together. We renovated the house. We put new photos on the shelf, her as a child, at graduations, on trips she took alone. And now, the 2 of us, smiling, with our eyes finally alive. One Sunday afternoon, sitting in the backyard drinking coffee, she asked me, "Would you have the courage to write all this down one day, in your own words?" Perhaps, but my version would be simpler. I would just say that a love torn away by force can still blossom when it finds real soil. She smiled. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you think other Claras are still out there?" "I'm sure, and they will find their way." She closed her eyes. She stood there in silence. That night, I wrote a letter. To all the mothers who are still searching, to all the daughters who are still waiting. And at the end, I left just one sentence. What was taken from us without choice will be rebuilt by the truth. A daughter back does not erase the pain, but it ignites what should never have been extinguished. Love. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you love. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any real stories like this. And tell us in the comments, do you believe that the truth always finds its way?